Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Danny Forster. I'm very happy to be here as your host, as your cultural ambassador for the final event this week at Chicago Ideas Week. Now, before we dive into the creative process, I just want to say a few quick housekeeping notes. Number one, this is the last day of an incredible week where they've had over 130 different events for the third year in a row, creating really a new piece of cultural, intellectual infrastructure for the city of Chicago. So a round of applause for CIW. That's an amazing thing. Also, we cannot forget the people footing the bill letting us be here today, so a big thank you to Leo Burnett Company for letting us actually be here. And lastly, just to nod towards social media, those of you who want to be hashtagging and telling all your friends and family about what's happening here today right now, as you've seen it all week, hashtag CIW. We will not take it as a sign that you're not paying attention if you tweet during the show, although I kind of feel like it is a little bit of that, but we still want you to tweet, so feel free and please do that. But let's talk about creativity for a minute. It's a kind of a weird, fascinating, elusive topic. I mean, are we dealing with something that's a straight line, a methodical process where you know what you're doing step by step to create an art object or a piece of architecture or a film? Is it intuitive? Are people just looking at a canvas, reacting, experiencing, making that piece before them? And today we're going to hear a kind of a multiplicity of perspectives from a multiplicity of disciplines, from culinary arts to film to design, architecture, fashion, even kind of behavioral analytics, to try and get a handle on this topic. Now, by way of introduction, I can just say I've had a kind of unique experience personally to be working in television, hosting a show about architecture, making architecture, directing films about architecture, and each way trying to get at an issue, which is, in my perspective, it's a very specific process. So on the show Build It Bigger, for those who've seen it, I've had a wonderful opportunity to travel to over 55, almost 60 different countries, climbing on top of tall buildings, walking on top of tall bridges, generally speaking, expressing my anxiety about the height of said piece of infrastructure. But fundamentally, what we're trying to get at in the show, despite the somewhat stupid title, is not the size of the building, right? It's actually why it looks the way that it looks. I mean, when you look at a building like that in Kuwait, skyscrapers in America don't look that way. So what is it about the context, the circumstances, in this case, the temperature, the wind, the path of the sun, the culture that produced that object? How did that impact the path towards creating that object? Yet, for example, here in Chicago, you have a wonderful building shockingly built by Donald Trump, which does not look like most skyscrapers, does it? Most go straight up, and yet this one jumps to the left and to the right. And to the left, why would it do that? Because Donald Trump likes shifting? Right? When things cost hundreds of millions of dollars, nothing can be arbitrary. So might a certain meteorological condition known to Chicago have some import here? Right? Are architects finding new ways to deal with wind and manage the structural reality of a tower? But at the same time, do the shifts you see in this building also have metaphorical meaning? For example, do the setbacks of that building happen to match exactly with the heights of other famous adjacent pieces of architecture, thereby embedding the building very much into the fabric of downtown Chicago? All is true. The idea being it didn't start on a napkin. It isn't simply a sketch. Now, on Build It Bigger, we've traveled all over the world. This is a project in Azerbaijan by the architect Zaha Hadid, who's Azerbaijan is a former Soviet nation, has an incredible long history of pattern making and carpets and fabrics. And how did the notion of the kind of flowing rugs and the tapestries and such participate in the architectural motivation of that building, right? It didn't come out of nowhere. It's not arbitrary. Now, in addition to being in front of the camera, I'm very fortunate to have had the opportunity to get behind the camera, creating a big documentary called Rising, Rebuilding Ground Zero, which was a big 6-hour film we did for Discovery with Steven Spielberg. That was a name drop. Just no way around that one. And we looked at the creation of what could arguably be the most important construction project in American history, the World Trade Center site. But you look at, say, Tower 1, right? Maybe the most important tower built in America, but why does it look the way it looks? Why does it twist that way? I mean, how on the one hand does it deal with the structural realities of being a safe tower? How does it deal with being really just a good office building, right? Just for fancy bankers and lawyers. But at the same time, how does it manage the symbolic meaning of understanding the event that produced its existence? So how can architecture, through geometry, how can an architect try and resolve that complicated issue and through that process create something that reflects the reality of the circumstances, be they emotional, be they architectural? As an architect myself, I've had the opportunity to get to make projects, houses in this case, that are shaped specifically to deal with the wind or the sun. In other case, we're very happy that we just broke ground on a hotel, actually, at the World Trade Center site itself. And this is a project which has to do all the hospitality needs and the people in the lobby and the rooms and so forth. But at the same time, how is this project inextricably tied to its place? In this case, how does the waterfall, the way the building is viewed and people view it, define the design of the building? So from our perspective, we see ourselves as a filter almost, ingesting ideas of circumstance, specific, local, regional concepts, and then running them through our own creative process. I'm going to leave you with one quick building before we dive into this discussion today that I want to use kind of as a frame for today's discussion. This is a project in Abu Dhabi. It's a real building. It's in the UAE, and this is a building built to celebrate the winning of a race, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Big, big deal. Abu Dhabi's coming on the world stage. They're going to build a building to show everyone about the building. So they make this building. It's really cool. It's so silly. Race cars actually drive through the building. It's totally bananas. In fact, you can sit by your hotel room, cars decelerating from 200 miles an hour as you're having a nap right here. But people think it's amazing. But for me, if you look at the building, less about the kind of mania of the cars, look at the project as a whole. What's happening there? There's a thing sitting on top of the building, right? So the architects, when they approached this project, their process was not to look at the history of architecture in Abu Dhabi, but the fashion. Right? That guy's wearing a dish dasha, right? Is that white dish dasha randomly white? No, it's really hot there, right? You want to reflect the sun. I mean, is there a reason that it's really long and flowing? Does he hate skinny jeans? No, I mean, there's obviously religious reasons, but the idea is if it's flowing and loose, there's passive cooling, right? The very same reason why when you light a fire in your house, the smoke goes up the chimney, not into your living room. He can passively cool his body. So if you could wrap the body in the desert for thousands of years, can you wrap a building? And the very same logic happened here. Glass panels that reflect the solar radiation. That gap from the building creates passive cooling. But in the same way the dish dasha kind of implies what's below it, so too can this on the building create amazing geometrical forms. But the exciting thing about a creative process like this is you don't know where it's going to end. So by beginning to deal with an environmental/cultural issue by day, by night, all of a sudden, you have a whole other issue. So now those glass panels each become a light. So if the Ferrari team wins the race, lo and behold, the building can communicate that information. So for me, what's fascinating is that the cultural logic of a place informed a creative process and produced an artifact that could not otherwise have happened had that process not taken place. So for me, it's interesting to kind of extract that hidden logic within the final object.